Mojaloop Foundation for more than 3 years now, working in the financial services industry for more than a decade, implementing payment systems that actually process cross-border payments. So this is a topic which is very close to my heart. So I guess for these sessions, as Steve mentioned, we'll start discussing first, like, what is the definition of an inclusive cross-border payment, and where are we on delivering this? And then we'll get from feedback on this from Dr. Jonathan Pinifolo, and then also, like, as Steve mentioned, because we have a lot of hub operator in the room, like, get some feedback from the audience as well. Actually, when we look at what is the definition of an inclusive payment, that should be the same, whether it's domestic payments or a cross-border system. So we should have exactly the same characteristic for both. That is to say, having, like, irrevocable push, account-to-account, instant availability, low cost, a system that is available 24/7, and in terms of usage, of course, being like mobile ready. I think it's a bit more difficult, unfortunately, to deliver an inclusive cross-border payment than this is for in a domestic context. However, like, lately, literally, like, everybody has been looking at how we can improve cross-border payments. And the Financial Stability Board and also the UN have been looking at setting some target around this. And for example, when we say that an inclusive cross-border payment should be low cost, what does that mean exactly? Which actually, like, the FSB has been setting some targets around this, and setting like that basically the cost should be of sending a remittance of $200 should be no more than 3% in on average by 2030, and with no corridors that is no more than 5%. So when we look at where we are on this journey of implementing inclusive cross-border payment, actually, like, according to the report that was published by the FSB in October, we are not there yet. So if we look at, for example, access, and having people accessing, like, a solution to send remittance payment, only 70% of people have access to a solution as opposed to the 90% set as a target. In terms of speed, actually, like, the target being set by the FSB is like 70% of cross-border payment should be credited to the final beneficiary within an hour, and we are only at 53% today. And finally, on transparency, like, the KPI being set is that all the fees, the FX rate, and also, like, all the different aspects of the payment should be detailed. Okay, so actually, like, when we look in, sorry, I forgot to mention it as well. So I'm a product person. So when it comes to actually, like, how we can deliver these KPIs, I look at it through a product lens, right? And how effectively the Mojaloop design can help when it comes to delivering this KPI and inclusive cross-border payment. So actually, when it comes to speed, through the Mojaloop platform, we can do better than what is said by the FSB, because again, like, the target set by the FSB is final beneficiary credited in an hour. As we heard this morning, when we look at inclusive payments, this is not enough, and we are looking at actually, like, having the final beneficiary being credited instantly. So how do we achieve this speed? Actually, through the design of the product, we're able to do that. One thing that, if you look at the design of the Mojaloop flow, there is this phase which is called pre-agreement of term. And the idea is, like, before starting the execution of the payment, that we agree on what is going to be the fees, what is going to be the FX rate as well being applied, so that at the moment we execute the payment, all the parameters are already defined. The flows is actually, like, supporting irrevocable push. So that means that returns or refunds are considered as a neutral transaction. Mojaloop is designed for instant availability, so instant basically clearing of the transaction with a confirmation of a credit. And also, like in the context of a cross-border payment, there is often a currency conversion involved. So how do we manage it? Actually, like for us, there will be part of the payment flow which is related to agreeing on the FX rate before the payment is executed. How do we make sure that the system can be operated 24/7? Actually, at a cross-border level, we are looking at only interlinking instant payment system, whether it's a Moja instant domestically or actually any other provider or system. One of the key things, and perhaps a consideration for the future, right? If you look today, why a cross-border payment cannot be processed instantly, often is because of the FX rate. As I already mentioned, we have addressed this point through the design, but it also could be because of sanction screening issue. So on this, I think one of the focus of the stream will be actually to see how we move away from sanction screening done on a transaction basis, but more done at the account or even customer level. I feel like a witch with the magic wand, which does not work. Okay, good. Now, when we look at this notion of cost, right? So I think when we look at again, like a cost of push to the customer and why cross-border payments are expensive. Actually, we need to look at how much does it cost to process a cross-border payment. And within cost, there is actually different category of cost. One is obviously the fees pushed to the customer on processing this cross-border transaction. So how actually we're trying to lowering that down through the design. One is by being clear of how much this transaction is going to cost. And two, actually, when a transaction is within to the hub, there is no predefined routing, which means that you can actually put different DFSP in competition to provide a route that will be at a lower fee as possible. The second thing is often when we look at the cross-border payment, a portion of the cost is linked to, again, the FX rate. So for this, through the design, there is a step where we ask for quotation on the rate, and through that, we actually create a competitive FX marketplace where hopefully the rate of the FX can be lower down. Settlement risk is also a key component of the cost of a cross-border transaction, and on this we support different type of settlement, so real-time gross settlement, bilateral net settlement, or multilateral settlement. And also we always verify that funds are available to settle the transaction before actually executing the transaction. Again, when it comes to cross-border transactions, the cost of managing exception is usually done manually and quite costly. Actually, we've completely eliminated this flow, as I mentioned earlier, where for us, we are only looking at irrevocable push with no return flow. And how we do that and make sure that there is actually no exception is, again, by making sure through the agreement of term phase that all the conditions of the payment will be defined and accepted by the debtor. On transparency, which is another criteria set by the FSB, actually the Moja Loop design is already compliant to this, right? There is all the details of the transaction are presented and agreed during the agreement of term phase. There is already a disclosure of the fees, there is already a disclosure of the FX rate, and there is already a breakdown of all this information, right? I think now, the next step is actually to implement all of this information in an ISO 20022 format so that it can be understood by everybody. And this is actually something we are looking at, engaging with the RMG to introduce actually a format for the agreement of term phase, which will be accepted and standardized. Now, when we think of access, actually, like the Moja Loop, flow and solution overall, like already support to reach the target when it comes to access. Like this is a solution which is mobile ready. This is a solution that supports different form of aliases. And again, this is done through like what we call the discovery phase, where we can link a phone number to an account, for example. And what we're exploring as well is how we make like these aliases interoperable, partnering with UNCDF on one of their POC. Now, when we look at access, actually, like we should probably, like go a step further when it comes to defining criteria to really see the success of implementing inclusive cross-border payment. And I think this morning we talked a lot about use case. And for me, that just confirms that beyond access, this concept of usability is probably one of the criteria to look at as well. And second thing is as well safety, because if you have access and can do a digital payment, but processing this payment is not safe and like you're exposed to fraud, nobody is going to want to use your solution. So how we actually look at this concept of usability and safety, I think we are looking at how do we reach the last mile. I feel like as well through the presentation this morning around gender gap and thinking of what are the requirements for women to process a payment. Perhaps there is also something to explore a bit more in this area. And the second thing is, I already mentioned it in the past, is around safety. How do we actually create a compliance history and allow sanction screening to be done even before the transaction is executed is something we want to explore more within the workstream. So I guess three main takeaways from what I just mentioned around the definition of a cross-border payment and where we are on delivering this. Key point is whether it's a domestic or cross-border payment, the definition should be exactly the same. The characteristic of the payment should be exactly the same. We need to look at low cost, irrevocable, push account-to-account payment done in a safe manner with a great user experience and with funds that are available instantly and a system that can operate 24/7. Now, when we look at where is Moja Loop on supporting this journey, actually, we think we're already there and on many aspects that we can do better than the KPI set by the FSPs. Now, for further consideration, obviously, we think that there are a few things that needs to be considered beyond the characteristics set by the FSB. And this is how do we look at global aliases? How do we look at sanction management slightly differently and before the execution of a payment? And how do we look at always reducing the cost? So I've talked about what success looks like, where we are on this journey. Actually, I would like to invite Jonathan Pini follow on the stage to also provide his feedback on this. Thank you for joining me on stage. I guess before I start to ask you some questions, would you mind to give a quick introduction of yourself?
All right, thank you, Julie. So my name is Jonathan Pinfo, and I work as the Chief Operating Officer for the Digital Financial Inclusion Program for COMESA. Actually, we're trying to come up with a regional retail payments platform that will cover 21 COMESA countries, but at the moment, we're currently focusing on the 8 initial pilot countries. Thank you.
So I talked a lot about what inclusive cross-border payments look like. I guess my first question would be today, how are you planning to implement inclusive cross-border payment across COMESA?
Thank you very much. So in terms of our plan, I think as the CEO for PesaLink said, we are looking basically at 4 key areas: processes, governance, technology, as well as even the whole ecosystem. So on governance, we've been talking with the central banks, just trying to make sure that we are in line with what the regulatory framework is looking at. I think it goes without saying that we have seen experiences whereby projects have been moving without the involvement of central bank governors, then they end up failing. So we don't want to repeat such mistakes. So we're trying to look at aspects like, for instance, maybe how the oversight is going to be done, how the business model is going to be done, but also above all, since there are different countries, we have to make sure that the policy framework is harmonized. That's number one. Number two, on the technology again, of course, we are envisaging, we are looking at commissioning the module of technology. We have already talked with the payments people in the central banks. And coming to the aspect to do with processes, at the moment, we are now trying to recruit vendors. Just some 30 minutes ago, we are opening financials for the vendors. So that's how we are preparing. Thank you.
And so when you talk about the technology being used, what does success look like? And do you use the KPI set by the FSBs or your Northern Star?
So in terms of success, what it looks to us as COMESA, number one, we are looking at adoption. The technology has to be adopted by the central bank governors. At the same time, also even the users themselves, the MSMEs, it has to be adopted. But above all, we're also looking at aspects in terms of usage. People should be able to use the platforms because platforms have been built in most regions across Africa, but when it comes to usage, it's very low. So we have to see how usage is going to be like. So when we are talking about success, we are looking at adoption and usage of the platform itself, because by the end of the day, everyone has to be included. There has to be inclusion in as far as usage is concerned.
Okay, thank you. So I guess we're going to use usability as a key criteria to look at to measure success, right?
Yes, yes.
I think another question that I have is, what are your key challenges today to deliver this vision and inclusive cross-border payments?
All right, so in as far as the COMESA project is concerned, I think as of now, what I would say is one of the key issues that we have to look at, maybe the challenges, is to do probably with the Forex engine. So in our context, we are looking at local currencies. People actually, when they're sending money or receiving, they have to use the local currencies. Now there are two issues that have to be looked at. On the technical side, how the design is going to be like. But also on the other hand, probably we are talking about economic issues, like for instance, there are some trade imbalances, and now maybe how do we set a common currency and the like. But I'm happy that work is going on around the area. But also, the other one probably is to do, I think there have been mentions about the standards. So ISO 222, also to see how best we are going to achieve such. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're almost running out of time, so I guess you gave us a few areas to focus on, FX, ISO. Is there any other features that you think are missing within the Mobile solution to deliver inclusive cross-border payments?
I wouldn't say missing features per se, but probably that's something that we need to enhance. So like, for instance, issues to do with safety, security. I do recall our previous meeting with the payments people from the central bank. We had it in December last year in Malawi. One thing that they were looking at is to see how secure is the system. Okay, also maybe being an open source software. So issues like, for instance, they were looking at maybe us producing an architecture for cyber security, because I think earlier on even the speakers mentioned today that trust is very important. If an MSME may be sending money or maybe receiving goods, there has to be trust. So I think security is also one other aspect that needs to be enhanced in as far as the system is concerned. So issues to do with fraud management and the rest. But also maybe finally, I would say, maybe one other thing is on usability. How do we promote usage? Yes, people can access platforms. How do we promote usage? So even by deploying other maybe value-added services, that's why in our platform, we are not only looking at the payments platform, we are looking at the whole eco-payment system. So what we're saying is we're going to have an e-commerce platform where MSMEs can check the information, can market the information. At the same time, if they want to pay, they can pay using the platform. So we're not only looking at just the payments, but we're looking at the whole payment ecosystem. So that by the end of the day, also what we're trying to solve as COMESA is to promote intertrade within the region, which is very low. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your answer. So in the very little time that we have left on this topic, like I'd like to open actually this discussion to the floor and understand from hub operator, like what are your thoughts around how do we deliver inclusive cross-border payment, and whether we should use the FSB KPIs as a Northern Star with usability as we just discussed now. Steve, do you want to pick up on specific people?
I would love to pick on, let's see, who have we not picked on? Vice, do you want to talk about anything with cross-border, considering the fact that the Philippines is one of the biggest markets for remittances? Any thoughts on how, and also because the Philippines is a part of Project Nexus, can you give us any thoughts on how you see instant interoperable payment systems and platforms like Higala tying into cross-border? Right behind you.
Yeah, well, I guess the biggest driver for cross-border payments is really the ability of the instant payment systems of the different countries to interconnect with the other instant payment networks of other countries. And that's, I think the key would be in terms of how fast they can comply with like ISO 20022 standards. I do know that the BIS already set the standard for implementation by 2027, I think. And like, for example, in our case in the Philippines, we're committed to implement that even before 2027. So the thing is, it will force, well, in the likes of InstaPay, where most of the financial institutions are not ready to, not compliant to ISO 20022. The key is for, well, there is a new like middleware service providers like Euronet that are providing services to convert like ISO 20022 to something that the legacy core banking systems of the different financial institutions can use. And so they can also participate. But the problem with that is, if you do that, if that's the way it's going to be implemented, then the banks will not be able, the banks and their customers will not be able to enjoy the benefits of ISO 20022. Because we do know that ISO 20022 has a lot of features that we can utilize from the mere fact that it has a lot of data fields that can be utilized, that both merchants and users customers can use for their payment transactions. And one thing that's good for the likes of us, the new players, is that from the get-go we're ISO 20022 compliant. So we're like natives of ISO 20022. And that would make Higala like ready to connect to like Project Nexus, and if it's going to be expanded later on. Okay, amazing. And so I think there's a lot that a lot of us would love to unpack with you of everything you just said, but unfortunately we don't have time. But so thank you for that. Do you have any other questions?
No, I saw Sabine. I will reach out to you after this session to get your feedback. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both so much. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Julie. Before we move on, I do want to say, because we introduced Kareem and I do introduced Julie, but because cross-border is a little bit more complicated, we have a number of people. So for all the hub operators who are saying, like I want to be part of this conversation, I didn't get my voice heard. Can I get Michael Richards to stand up? And can I get Cece? Is Cece still in the room? I don't see her. She must have just stepped out. Arunjay, are you still in the room? All right. So this group, Cece from Glenbrook, Michael from Infix, Arunjay from Arunjay, and Julie now from the Mojib Foundation. You can stand up as well. These are the people who are leading us on the design of the overall cross-border solutions that we're working on. And so anyone who has any questions or opinions, thoughts, please reach out to them. I promise you there's nothing they would love more than to hear your requirements. So please reach out to the three of them and CC as well when she comes back in. So thank you very much.